In this video we are taking a look at the Benoni defense, and I love to play this immediately with c5 after my opponent plays d4, allowing for this, which is the Benoni gambit accepted. Of course, white can also push here to d5, which I will take a look at a little bit later in the video. So what to do if they capture you? Well, we immediately play this move e6, developing our bishop so that we can recapture this pawn on c5. And the most played move here by white is actually not that good, and that is to play b4, because their idea is, well, I'm already up a pawn, I will protect this. And this is one of the many ways white can destroy himself in the Benoni defense, because that's what this Benoni is all about. I love to play this as setting up traps and waiting till white makes one little slip up, and then we immediately take the win. So here, b4, we strike back with a5. Of course, if they capture us, we have check, and we capture this, so that is perfectly fine. There's no problem here. So they will usually try to defend this pawn again. And here the most played move is just terrible. The most played move in this position is the move c3. And white is already losing at this point because nobody knows how to play against this Benoni, apparently. So what you can do here is you can just take. And the most played move here is takes. And then we have this. We have queen f6, attacking this rook, and the game ends here in 5 moves. And that's the most played variation here in this Benoni gambit. Of course, they can also defend with a3, which is possible. And if you capture, of course, they cannot capture here because otherwise they lose the rook. So they have to do something else. So yeah, maybe something like bishop here or bishop to b2. But you can already tell this is not really that good of a position. For white, we can just take this, white captures here, and this is already looking so terrible for white. And here we even have this queen check, and then here we can even do this, or if they play this move, you can take the c5 pawn back. So if they go for this b4 ID, defending the pawn, that's just not a good plan for them. So better players will play something like e4 or maybe knight f3 and then later e4. And these variations are also just insane for black. So here we can capture this pawn for free. And just take a look at all of my pieces and how I am building up an attack on the king side. This is already the first one. And just keep an eye on that. So knight f3, then we play knight c6. Okay. Here they might play something like bishop d3, or maybe develop the other knight. It doesn't really matter here. We're going to develop our knight. And our main ideas here, they can push, of course, but that loses immediately because now we have this double attack on the pawn. So yeah, that's also perfectly fine. They might castle. I think castles is the most played move. And then I don't castle straight away. I play queen c7. And you can already see here, we now have this, this, this as well. And also this knight can come in. So already here at move 6, we are starting an amazing attack on the enemy king. If white ever plays a move like c3, it's just important that you remember to play this a6, because I don't really need you to study specific lines here or memorize theory, but just know that we have this setup here. And then if they play with the knight, of course you play a6, because if you do something more passive, like castles, it can always be a little bit annoying here if the knight comes in. So we play a6. And here white can play a normal move, like for example bishop here, but white could also play the move queen e2. And that is one of the moves you have to be on the lookout for, because if they play queen e2, you will most likely win this game in amazing fashion. Because we have the move knight to g4. Knight to g4. And you might think, well, this is nothing crazy, right? Like, what is this knight doing here? White can just kick your knight. And that is where we have now set this amazing trap. If they kick your knight, we now have knight d4, attacking the queen, attacking the knight. Of course, if they capture you, bam, this is already a checkmate. If they say, maybe I messed up, I have to move the queen, well, there is check. And then, of course, also checkmate here. So this position is already completely lost. The best thing actually for white is this variation. That's the only way white can survive. So yeah, it's already game over here if they play this move. So that's why we are setting up this trap. And maybe white could play something else, like maybe they think, I'm just gonna leave this knight here and play a little move, something like the bishop here, or maybe something like a little pawn move, just something casual. Well, bam, we still have this plan. We still have this knight here. If this captures, checkmate. If the queen goes back, capture, capture, and checkmate as well. So that is just amazing. So we can play this if they play the queen to e2. Of course, they don't have to play the queen to e2. They can play something like bishop here, or they could also play something like bishop here. But that doesn't really matter because those positions are also good for white. So if they play the bishop here, what I like to always do is go back, because we didn't have a defender on the knight and you don't really want to allow this. So you can just go here, and then our plan is to go to the center. So for example, this, and this is still fine, and we still have some attacking chances in the future here. So that is also good. And if they play something a little bit more passive, like for example bishop here, well, we just have a good middle game. You can castle, and then you can already see here that our position is asking us to do something like this. For example, before b5, here you can actually choose what you want to do. I do like both bishop b6 here and bishop e7. I think they're both playable. If you want to take the more active approach, probably bishop b6 is the best. And then I'm trying to find a move for white, but it's pretty hard to find anything here. Maybe something like developing the rook for a future push. Well, the idea is that we have this bishop, this queen, this knight can still come in. Probably white will have to play something like h3 to defend this, but this is already looking really nice. And here we have something like knight e5 as well, just to get another piece involved. If they take us, doesn't really matter. We're just getting closer and closer to a full kingside attack. And we can also always bring in these rooks and then push this pawn. So I'm gonna leave it here, but you can already see this is pretty amazing. We have so many traps here. And if at any point, for example, let's say something like this, and then if at any point white goes for this queen move, which is always possible, just remember you always have these tactics. For example, here with the knight, they have to capture you, you capture back, and this is already a lot of trouble, because if I just play a regular move, of course here we lose this knight. If you try to move the knight, here you lose this rook. So yeah, just a lot of trouble. And even in a position like this, for example, here you can also still go for this move. If they play this, bam, knight d4, winning the game. So that's just the main idea I wanted to show you. We are setting up all of our pieces and we are waiting until white makes a mistake. And there are a couple of mistakes white can make, because we usually have pressure here on this file. We also have this. Sometimes they will play a more passive move like rook here, but that's also already completely losing because there's this. And if they go back, bam, again, even here, knight e4, because if they take, we have the checkmate. And if they do something else, of course, this is also checkmate. So just really remember that pattern, because there are so many different lines, and almost on every line, you will be able to play this checkmate. Unless if they play everything perfectly, and even then, we still have our bishops, or queen, or knights, everything is looking at the enemy king. A better approach for white is to push this pawn to d5 instead of capturing us. Quite simply because it avoids all of these trap lines, but this is also a pretty fun opening to play. Here we're going to take a totally different approach. You just have to keep in mind that you want to do this kingside fianchetto, a bit like the King's Indian defense. And if they ever start threatening to kick your knight, of course, just play d6 and you're fine. If they develop, we're just gonna trade our bishop anyways for this knight. We don't need a light squared bishop in this opening. So if they ever do something like this, you can just take. And of course, we develop this knight here, because this square is not possible, and this is also not an active square. And then here, you have to remember just this one concept, that is to move back your knight. And we move back this knight so that this bishop is now opened up. And that gives us a lot of control over these squares. And also, if this knight ever moves, sometimes there are tactics here on this pawn. So that is already a good move for us. And then let's say they play something like f4. Well, what I like to do here is to play my knight here to e5. And capturing this is actually quite bad for black. But first I'm going to show you if they play a little bit more passive move. just a simple ID. We always play this knight here. And that's just what I wanted to show you. We always play this knight here, and then what we also do is we save this e6 move for later on in the game. So once we are running out of moves, we are going to play this e6 move, and if they try to attack you, there is actually a pretty crazy tactic here that is take, and then push. And this is already winning because, for example, this, and then this knight is under attack. Where is the knight gonna go? Like, let's say the knight goes here, but then you take this, and we just have this formidable center. So that is if they play bishop e3. If they play maybe a bit more active move, something like bishop here, you also just put the knight in there. If they take, you take with the bishop, that's just fine. a6 is always a good move to remember in these lines, just to make sure this knight cannot go here, and also because we have this b5 push, of course they can play a4 to stop it. Or knight can now go back here, in the future maybe even go back here. And this might seem a little bit strange, but this is perfectly fine because our bishop is really active here. Also, our bishop will be able to go here if necessary, so the knight is actually well placed here. And then you might get something like this, and again, if you ever run out of moves, if you have played everything else, you can just play this e6 line, and then play f takes e6. And our goal is not to push this. We are not going to push this d-pawn. We are just going to keep the position like this, and wait until white makes a mistake. And white will make a mistake, because these positions are incredibly complex to play as white. Even the engine here is already saying every line is already bad for white here. There's just almost not a single good move. Actually, the best move here would maybe be something like g3, but that's still better for black. And if they play something that looks quite normal, like for example here, the queen up, well, there are a couple of things we can do. You can even bring back the knight here, but you can also play queen to e7, and then we always have this simple ID to keep this and not to push this, but just to protect this pawn so that it doesn't fall, because if this pawn falls, your entire position collapses. And then here again, you should really pause and try and find a good move for white. It's almost impossible. Almost every single move loses material. If they play something like the rook up, again, almost always knight e7 is your plan, just because you can open up here on this side of the board. And let me just show you one line. There is usually rook f7. Again, I'm trying to find anything for white, and then we already have this pressure here. And how are you going to play this with white? Maybe something like bring the knight back, but then we have bishop f4, the queen has to move, the knight's going to come in, and you can already see how this will be so much trouble for white. Maybe they try something like, I was going to say push our bishop, but then here they lose this bishop, so yeah, they can't move it. Everything is just stuck. All of their pieces are stuck, and that's the entire idea. Maybe something like the queen protecting here is the best move, but we don't even have to take. We just keep building up the pressure, and white simply doesn't have a single good move. They simply don't have a single good move. And here you don't even have to do anything. You can just play bishop here, and we are still threatening to take this. Their best defense is probably trying to go for this, and that's already quite terrible for black. And here we even have this crazy move, rook to f3. And if they capture this, we now have this checkmating net. And if they move the queen, let's just say they move the queen here, we also have this checkmate. And they have to play something like g3 here. You can sacrifice, you can take with the rook, or here you can even better take here with the rook, take, and then, for example, give the check. So that's just insane. White will just destroy himself in these positions, and that's the whole idea. You don't really have to do anything special. You just have to remember this particular setup, and then you play e6, you try and go for this, and then you just slowly build up all of your pieces, for example, something like this, or the variation where we took a look at, for example, here. That's also possible, or if they make another move, this is also possible, and you always try to play the same idea. You double the rooks, and at some point we're going to activate the knight, activate the queen, and this position is already dead lost for white. Even though everything seems in order, we have the same material, this is already dead lost for white. So just remember this idea, doubling your rooks, and here, for example, yeah, like I said, knight d1, and then we have the bishop, we have the knight, we have this, and many insane tactics, but you do need to be good at tactics if you want to play this opening. And then we have the final variation, and I have to say I didn't really find anything extremely exciting in this line, but I'm going to show you. So this is if they play d4 c5, and if they play something completely passive. I have had this online one time where they play c3. What do you do? Well, what I like to do is I like to play e6, just simply because we can still go for this line. And then, yes, they can play b4 here, but we can just go back, and this is still fine. Many of the same ideas apply. But if they really don't want to capture you, let's say, yeah, if they capture you, of course, we have the same variation. But let's say they really don't want to capture you. Usually they play something like e4 or knight f3. And if they play this, you should take a look at my video, my no theory video on the French defense, because this is just a French defense. We're going to play d5, and this is the French defense, the advanced variation. So just take a look at my French defense video, because if your opponent plays the really boring move c3, you will get this French defense. And even if they play something like knight f3, that's good. That's probably even better, because here you have d5 and you have this kind of setup, which is pretty boring. Or they could maybe go for something like a London system, but none of this is really a problem for black, but they are maybe a little bit more annoying or boring, while the other lines, when they accept your gambit or when they push, both of those variations are extremely explosive. And if you want to analyze this further, the Lichess study that I used for this video is available on Discord, so check out the link in the description. You can check all of these lines, there are even more lines in the study, and try this out for yourself and see how you can play this opening into your opening repertoire. So that's it for this video, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye!